Good morning. I'm Larry Jacobs. I'm a faculty here at the University of Minnesota. I want to welcome you to the Hubert H. Humphrey School of Public Affairs. This is the university's School of Public Affairs. There are a couple quick announcements. First is please shut off your phones. That entails not just silencing them, but shutting them off. And the primary reason for this is we don't want to embarrass you when we turn around and stare at you, when your phone is buzzing or whirling or beeping or whatever. So please shut off your phones. We are going to be counting on you to be giving us outstanding questions. We use question cards not to weed out difficult questions. We want all sorts of questions, and the harder the better. We have a bias towards dissent. So give us your best shot. We want that. The only reason we do this is because it creates a smoother sound for our friends in the media. And the result is that an event like this one that has, a bit more than 100 people will be broadcast to many hundreds, thousands, and so forth. And so far, we've had a decent track record of that. The Democratic Party has been in a losing streak. Since 2008, it's seen its majorities in the House and the Senate disappear and turn into Republican majorities. It's seen its fair share of state legislative bodies and governorships also move into Republican hands. And in November, Donald Trump won in a shocking win. This has provoked and stimulated quite a debate, a number of rallies and marches, and a movement going by the name of Resistance or Indivisible or other names has taken off with tremendous gusto. And there's been a significant effort to rebuild the Democratic National Committee. Our guest this morning, Keith Ellison, has been the thick of all of that. He's one of the most kind of influential voices within the Democratic Party, and he's joining us this morning for a conversation. I'm very delighted to have my colleague here at the Humphrey School and a well-known, well-respected reporter at the Pioneer Press, Rachel Stassen-Berger, co-moderating this event. Please give a warm welcome to Congressman Keith Ellison.
Hey, everybody.
So I want to just start, a friend of ours in the audience wanted to know why we're not doing the Pledge of Allegiance. It's not a tradition we have here at the Humphrey School, but I've made a promise, and I promised him I would say this publicly. We're going to look into it and see why we're not. I don't really have a problem with it, but we'll figure out why that tradition got started. Congressman Ellison, I want to ask you about the events or the event of last night. One of the special elections happened, the 6th District of Georgia. What's your read on that?
My read is that there is a tremendous amount of liberal, progressive, democratic energy is surging forward, and people are ready to get up and go. And we had a good candidate in John Ossoff, and he ran hard, and he did really, really well. Now, at 48% plus, he won well enough to lead the field, but not enough to win the race. There's going to be a runoff because he didn't hit 50% plus one. And this is going to be very tough because this is a traditionally Republican district, no doubt about that. And, I think Tom Price won it by 27-some%, and Trump only won it by 1.6%. It's a district with a lot of folks with a lot of education, and it's a district that traditionally Democrats have not won in. But
isn't that a disappointment to the Democrats? If you
don't win, it's a disappointment. But doing better than you're expected to do is actually encouraging.
Representative, how do you keep that encouragement going if so far you haven't had wins post-Trump? In the specials, Democrats worked hard, spent money, and yet there haven't been wins. You didn't win the 50% plus one last night.
Well, I tell you this, when you think about the needs that people have on the ground, that's all the motivation you really, really need. When you consider some of our neighbors are being banned, and others are being walled, and others are having their health care threatened to be snatched away, and they're talking about getting rid of Planned Parenthood. And, I mean, it gets clear to you that you got to fight no matter what happens. And so if what you're relying, I mean, real leadership is you fight and fight hard and urge others to fight, even if the facts aren't that promising. And I think that in this moment, we need leaders who are going to say, keep campaigning, keep campaigning hard, keep knocking doors and doing those phones.
So how do you keep the party from being the party of no? You just said all the things that the party is against. What is it for, given the losses? How do you rebuild
Boy, thanks for
that?
asking me that. That's like a great question. No, it really is a wonderful question because, look, 63% of all Americans have less than $500 in the bank. You have a situation where average student debt in Minnesota, I think, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000. You have a labor movement which has helped bring the working class into the middle class, but now has been on decline for about 4 decades. And in my opinion, the Democratic Party is for 2 basic things. It stands on 2 solid feet. 1, economic fairness, liberty and justice for all, if you want to do a little bit of the pledge. When it comes to the economy, this economy is rich enough in order to make sure that everybody has an affordable education, in order to pay a livable wage. This economy, there's enough money in this economy for us to have roads that you don't bust your axle in driving down the road, or even worse, see the I-35 plummet into the Mississippi River. We have enough money to do these things, and yet wealth has been concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. The Democratic Party has to be that agent that says we need a fair economy. The government is actually a good thing and helps people lead better lives. The other foot of the Democratic Party has got to be fairness. Fairness for everybody. And this is, you can be as rich as you want to be or not, but no matter your color, your race, your gender, your sex, your sexual orientation, these things should not count against you in your pursuit of happiness, right? So those 2 things, fair economy and fairness for all, that's what the Democratic Party is all about. That's what we're for. So I'll tell you one thing, we're for health care for everybody. We're for fair retirement for everybody. We believe that people should retire in dignity. We believe that everybody who works, if you work full-time, you shouldn't be in poverty, period. Shouldn't happen. And we believe in strong public schools so that every parent can aspire for their child to have a great life.
But Congressman Ellison.
So that's what we're for.
Many of those items have been part of the Democratic agenda for some time.
Right.
Barack Obama ran on some of those very same planks in 2008.
True.
He won Democratic majorities in the House and the Senate won. And then they started to implement stimulus and the Affordable Care Act and some of the other issues on that agenda. And Republicans started to just, kind of storm all across the country, including here in Minnesota, where the DFL only won 9 counties in the presidential election out of 87. So if that's the right message, what's gone wrong?
Well, we won some pretty important counties. but I will say this. What's gone wrong? That's a very important question. And in your intro, you kind of laid out the dire situation, and you're right. What has gone wrong? My opinion about what's gone wrong is that the Democratic Party as a whole has focused too much on presidential elections every 4 years and not enough on local races, blue and red states. We focus too much on purple states. And we focus on likely voters. We need to focus on all the voters. And we need to go into every neighborhood, the low turnout neighborhoods. We got to put a lot of time, energy, resources in there. Because I'm going to tell you something, as bad as, even in Minnesota, we've had tough times in our state legislatures. We actually control all 7 statewide officers, both senators, all 5 state officers. That's actually a pretty good achievement. How have we done it? Well, in the 5th Congressional District, we have dramatically increased voter turnout. And we've done it by starting early, turning on during the off year. We've done it by knocking every door. We've done it by engaging all communities. And we've done it based on the tradition laid out by people like, Don and Arvon Fraser and Paul Wellstone and Hubert H. Humphrey and But we haven't just taken what they've given us, we've actually tried to add something to it. So that's kind of how we've been able to win statewide and buck national trend. When you saw Michigan and Wisconsin fall to Trump, we didn't fall to Trump because we turned out the vote here in the 5th, and that's why I ran for DNC chair, to try to spread it.
So does that suggest then that the DNC, under your leadership, should be focusing on core Democrats, where you can drive up turnout, like as you described in the 5th, and
Right.
and not really squander resources trying to get swing voters who may be more conservative, where perhaps pollsters have come back and said, with just this message, you can turn these somewhat conservative messages to the Democratic Party, and if you water down the message you've just described.
Right. See, I don't think we go left or right. I think we got to go down and reestablish relationship with the grassroots voter. So I assure you, even though we lost a bunch of counties in the state of Minnesota, you go to those counties and people are worried about basic livability issues. They're worried about, is the plant leaving? Is the mine going to shut down? Can I get a decent price for the crops that I'm selling? People are worried about this stuff. And if we're not talking to them and listening to them and in relationship with them, then they're going to either not show up at all or choose a candidate who they feel is just going to sort of like flip the table. And I think when that happens, obviously whoever's in power is not going to do as well. So I think that the real goal is not to abandon any voter, but to really re-engage on a relationship basis. So, for example, the thing I think that we need to de-emphasize is less television, less telephone polling, and more on-the-doors, face-to-face relationship.
So you, in some ways, Representative, have sort of modeled that in the 5th, and you've
Yep.
talked about the 5th when you were running for DNC. But looking at the statistics from the 5th, in off years, it actually hasn't had that much turnout. In 14, according to my calculations, it was 7th in turnout. In 12, it was 5th, just in
Compared to who?
pure numbers, assuming all congressional districts have about the same.
In Minnesota or the country?
No, just here.
No, let's talk about that, because I can tell you in 14.
You had an increase, you had a significant increase.
Right.
But it did not lead the state.
Which congressional district led the state in absolute turnout in 2014? I would say maybe the 3rd.
Probably.
I'd say the 5th is 2nd.
All right.
Yeah. And then
It's not what my numbers say, but I'll take your word for it.
And then in 16, we got the most. I would urge anybody listening to this broadcast to go on the Minnesota Secretary of State's website, look at all the congressional districts, tear and compare who has the most voter turnout, which congressional district had the most turnout in the state of Minnesota. I'm telling you right now, and it was the 5th congressional district. And in 2014, Eric Paulson got 170, I got 167. I'm sure that I was at least 2nd.
Oh, certainly for you, but overall.
No, I'm talking about all 8 congressional districts.
In any case, let's talk about the mechanics of that. In the 5th congressional district, you have some of those hard-to-reach populations.
Well, let me ask you one question. Are you telling me that in 2016, the 5th congressional district did not have the most votes of any Democratic votes of any congressional district?
Not most voters.
We absolutely did. Could somebody look it up on the website?
I promise,
Minnesota Secretary
if
of State?
I'm wrong, I will tweet a correction and I'll send it to you.
Okay,
And we're going to talk a little bit about social media, so we'll
Good.
have a little dialogue.
good.
We'll continue it there. In any case, talk about the mechanics of how you want to do that nationwide. You know your voters well. You've been working with them for more than a decade. You're not going to have that opportunity every congressional district. So who's going to do it? How many staffers is it going to take? And frankly, how much money is it going to take? With the railing against big money a lot of Democrats have done, how are you going to raise enough money to have the operations, to have turnout across the country?
Well, here's the thing about money, and it's important to keep this in mind. Money, at least until today, still cannot cast a vote. You still need a person to do that. Now, I know people, you know exactly what I mean. You still need a human being to walk into a ballot box and cast that vote. And so I think a lot of Democrats assume that more money, more wins. I think that while statistically that's probably true, that I think the real thing that we've got to do is mobilize people more. And you don't need all the money that we raise to spend on television that we raise. I think we actually need to reallocate the amount of money that we're spending more towards field, more towards a direct relationship building with voters. That, I think, is the path to
But
victory.
those are expensive propositions. In your own congressional campaign, you've spent a lot of money on that mobilization. You know, so how do you do that without
Well, we spent a lot of
giving
money.
up your principles on big money is bad?
Well, we spent money on. We gave a lot of money to other candidates. Actually, our actual campaign doesn't really cost that much money, but we have to raise to help other people win. So if you actually look at the cost per vote, we're actually doing really well. Now, but the larger question you're asking me is, how do you avoid taking money from interests that have something in it that they want and is not necessarily the public good? Well, I think that Bernie Sanders proved you can run a presidential campaign $27 at a time. People really will donate to your campaign if they believe that you're running the kind of campaign that's trying to connect with them. And I think that one of the things that we've got to do is match the message, though. The message has to be populist. It has to be a message that connects with people, and it has to meet the needs that they have. So we've got to talk about just college affordability, investing in apprenticeship programs for non-college young people. People will support a campaign that is talking about stuff that they got to have. Getting money out may actually get more money into your campaign because people will think, well, this guy's or woman is working for me, right? And so I think that the money's not the problem. You just need candidates who are willing to say we're going to emphasize small dollar, we're going to emphasize non-corporate PACs, and I actually don't think there's anything wrong with labor PACs. Personally, I'll defend that because this is just the collected money of workers, But folks who have a particular policy that they want that's going to add to their bottom line, I actually don't think should be allowed to donate to campaigns at all. But Citizens United being what it is, that's a longer term fight.
So just looking at Minnesota, the legislative races here, Democrats outspent Republicans 2-1.
Right.
There were plenty of candidates running a populist economic message, and the Republicans won the majority in
Sure.
the House and the Senate. So if that's the model, why didn't it work in 2016 for the DFL?
I just think that we have got to dramatically increase our door-to-door contact with people, and it needs to start earlier. And then when we get in power, we need to execute on an agenda that wins. But then also understand, this is an element of art and science too. And you are going to have certain wave years. So you want to talk about like the counties that we didn't win in. I would across the state. Well, we did win the state, but the counties that we didn't win in, the truth is that Trump was a candidate who people considered to be bringing something new. They considered him to be somewhat of a truth teller. I think that has been challenged, And I also think that there was an element of he's going to tell it like it is, Whereas I think that they thought our candidates were a little bit more just sort of
When you say our candidates,
Democratic candidates.
You mean Hillary Clinton?
Yeah. Look, and I'm not here to blame Hillary Clinton. I got a lot of good things to say about Hillary Clinton. But I will say, and I will defend my position, that people considered her status quo. And that may have been unfair, but that was a prevailing perception. And I think we should have emphasized how she really was talking about economic policy that was going to be transformative, and we didn't do that nearly enough.
If I recall, you were one of the early predictors that Trump could do quite well.
Yep.
And I think
True.
you got laughed at on a national show for saying that.
It
Is
was
that
so
right?
embarrassing. Yeah, it was actually July 2015. I was on Stephanopoulos' show. I said, look, Trump has a lot of momentum. He could be the Republican nominee, and if he's the nominee, he could be president. And if so that idea scares you, you better start campaigning. I think Maggie Haberman, choked on her coffee because she was laughing so hard. And, I think that Stephanopoulos said, you don't really believe that. Well, I wanted to be wrong.
So Representative, what made you see what others could not see? And why, if you were running to be the head of the Democratic Party, did no one listen to you? And why will they listen to you now if you're right again?
Because it really was kind of an outrageous thing to say that Trump could be the Republican nominee in July 2015. It really was kind of out of the mainstream thought. People just kind of assumed, this guy is ridiculous. He is going to, look, how can you attack a war hero like John McCain? How can you say how can you say you're going to ban Muslims? How can you say all the things that he said in your campaign not tank? Well, he did. And so in defense of the people who were wrong, and, I was right, I can see why they would have taken that position. I just think that you got to look at the fact that, it means something when somebody goes to speak and gets 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 people out to listen to them. That matters. And to say that's nothing is making a big mistake. The fact that he was filling up those auditoriums consistently, that he was saying outrageous things to Jeb Bush and a whole bunch of other people, and it didn't seem to hurt him, was something that I think you really got to pay attention to. So that's my take on that. But I remember so well the day and the week before Jesse Ventura's election. Look, he had opponents that were really good. Skip Humphrey's a wonderful candidate. And, Norm Coleman had been around politics for many years and well known. And yet, here comes Jesse, right? You can't discount the importance of celebrity. People seeing him on Celebrity Apprentice, and that mattered. They know who this guy is.
So, Congressman, just to extend your admiration for Donald Trump's campaign, what's your prediction for 2020? Do you think it's far-fetched to think of Donald Trump running and winning in 2020?
I predict he will lose, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I think that you can't do the things he's proposing without doing real damage to the economy. And he's the president. He will be held responsible for that. You cannot, if you just look at his proposed skinny budget, if he actually did those things, I bet you we would have 10% unemployment. And if you get that, whoever's president is going to have a whole lot of explaining to do. And then, his effort just on the Affordable Care Act. A lot of Republicans benefit from the Affordable Care Act. If he actually is able to try to push a repeal bill through, so far he's been unsuccessful, he is going to hurt people who he said he was there to help. And then, of course, all of his core promises of draining the swamp have been blasted. So that is going to hurt him. As long as he can have a decent economy and can appear to be a reformer, he might be able to win another term. But if he's revealed as a fraud and not a reformer, and the economy hurts, and the wealthiest even do better under him while the rest of us languish, I just don't see him being able to win again.
Speaking of presidential politics, was President Obama responsible for some of the failures of 2016, and if so, how?
Yeah, he was. And I'm a great fan of President Obama. I'm totally voted for many things that he supported. Dodd-Frank, Affordable Care Act, Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. I can keep going. Wonderful achievements. But Barack Obama could have been a better party leader. And I think that the fact that he wasn't has put his legacy in jeopardy. Your legacy is not a building that he's going to construct in Chicago housing his presidential papers. His legacy is the work that he has done, which I believe is tremendous. But given that we did not We lost a lot of state house seats, governorships, secretaries of states. His true legacy is in danger, and I think that he can't say that he wasn't part of those losses. I mean, who else, right?
So Representative, what should he have done to build the party? And what
I think-
lessons have Democrats learned so they won't make those mistakes again?
I think that he should have been far more out there in 2010, which was a year when we were going to be doing redistricting. I think he should have been campaigning like he was on the ballot, and should have been very visible. I think he should have been much more. I think in 2008, he's great at getting himself elected, but I think he should have worked much more closely with Congress and others. And I think in 2014, we had record low voter turnout, 72-year low, something like 36% voter turnout. And I think, that too really, was a time when he needed to be very visible, very present, very engaged. So I think that's what he needed to do. He needed to raise money for state legislative races. See, the one thing is that, most people experience a Democratic and Republican Party at the local level. And yet I think the National Democratic Party has spent too much time thinking about presidential politics. And we absolutely got to be a city, state, county party and put resources, time, and energy into that. And that means whoever's the head of the party.
Professor Jacobs has a question.
Congressman Ellison, we have a number of questions from our friends here in the audience, and a series of them are about the polarization in Washington, and your approach, your ideas about how the Democrats can rebound. One of these questions says that you've talked about moving forward to protect health care, human rights, and other issues. How do you do that without demonizing Republicans and widening the gap between Democrats and Washington?
I'm really sorry, but I think it is I don't mind demonizing somebody who's trying to cut Meals on Wheels. I mean, I'm just not cool with that. I am not okay with cutting Trio. I am not okay with taking 24 million people off health care by 2026. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and I'm not going to say, oh, well, they have a good point of too. No, they don't. People should have health care. Everybody should be able to have health care. Now, so my thing is not to try to convince Republicans to become Democrats. My thing is to get Democrats to get out and vote and get active and engage in the electoral process. If anything, I want to go to the potential Stein voter and say, look, I know that you're frustrated with the Democratic Party, but, there is no third-party escape here. You've got to build the Democratic Party brand. The United States, like it or not, is a two-party country. And you may think that's too bad, but that's the way it is now. And so for you, there is no third-party escape. If everybody who voted for Jill Stein would have voted for Hillary Clinton would be the president right now. And I'm not casting aspersions. I'm not even criticizing them, but I'm trying to just make it very clear to people that when Democrats lose elections, bad things happen to good people, like Planned Parenthood being threatened with repeal, like Dodd-Frank, the Affordable Care Act, being attacked. And so we've got to get busy. We've got to get serious and realistic about where our political fortunes lie.
So just to give an example,
Yeah.
Republicans recently failed in the House to pass a repeal of the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
There was then a period, which I think is ongoing, of new conversations and at least hints in the media that President Trump and the Trump administration and perhaps some congressional leaders are interested in finding a bipartisan approach. Would you be willing to support a bipartisan approach that would entail some curtailment of the Affordable Care Act, but would also get Republicans on board with some changes in Medicaid and perhaps the exchanges and perhaps some of the regulations?
Let me tell you, I will support any policy that helps the American people. And I don't care who's proposing it. But I will not support any policy that hurts the American people just for the sake of some fake bipartisanship. And what I mean by that And look, I'm never gonna, if Republicans said to me, hey, look, Keith, we think it's ridiculous that Medicare cannot negotiate drug prices. We believe it would help the market, it would bring market transparency, it would be better and would lower prices. Will you join me? I'm like, absolutely, put me on the list first. But if they say we're gonna cut service delivery and benefits so that we can, get more money for someone to have a tax cut who doesn't need the money and didn't probably ask for it, I'm like, absolutely not. And so that's kind of how I look at these issues.
So Representative, speaking of looking at those issues and how you operate in Congress, with the new role at the DNC, will the 5th Congressional District suffer for the lack of
No way.
attention? And how do you combine those two?
This is a great question. I want to assure everybody that we will have as many, if not more, points of contact in the district as we've ever had. Even during the DNC race, we had several, community forums. We increased our activity in terms of constituent services, and there were a few days when I couldn't be home as much as I wanted, but that race is over now. So, like just last night, we had a community forum. We got another one tonight. We're going to be super busy. So I don't want anybody to be worried. Let me just tell you this. I mean, I'm offering you as an example of, how progressive politics can really work, and I'm offering you as an example of what it means that to if you really work on voter turnout, how you can literally help the state stay blue. The reason that we didn't fall to the belt that waved across the northern part of the United States is because we really turned out the vote here in the 5th. And so, no, the 5th it plays an even more prominent role in my mind than it ever. And I could tell you this, in some national conversations, one time somebody said to me and Ken Martin, who's the head of the DFL, well, Minnesota's an outlier. You can't, I said, no, we're not an outlier. And if we are an outlier, we're a good outlier. And you'd do well to try to look at the way we do politics here in Minnesota. And it sounds a little bit like bragging, very un-Minnesotan. But the truth is, our voter turnout is still the best in the country. And I think other places that are turning in 28, 35, 50% voter turnout might want to look at how we do things around here.
Be more specific on that. Mechanically, there are some people who will listen to this and say, okay, how do we do what they do in Minnesota
Right.
in Michigan?
Well, one thing we got here in Minnesota is we have a great progressive table, right? So we have the Democratic Party, but we also got great labor partners. We also got groups like Take Action, Knock. We have new groups like Indivisible. And we have, and rather than fight with each other over resources, we try to have a level of cooperation. We got some progressive leaders who understand the importance of cooperation. We have a great coordinated campaign, I think, and I'll tell you that people who work on the coordinated campaign complain about the coordinated campaign. But if you compare it to how other states are doing it, we're way ahead. We have groups like Win Minnesota with, Elida Messenger's leadership. And we actually have some people who are in the donor class here who actually have a very strong sense of the common good. You see the Kaplan stepping up, you see Vance Opperman stepping up, you see people who got real wherewithal willing to invest in the common good. And I think this is a great advantage that we have. And then perhaps the most important thing is we got a tremendous, everybody in this room benefits from people who are no longer in this room. People like Hubert Humphrey. I mean, they made a world for us, and we are benefiting from it still. When they got the Farmer Labor Party united with the Democratic Party, nobody in this room other than maybe Don and Arvon remember it, but they made this for us, and we all are richly benefited because of it. So we're lucky, we're beneficiaries of history. Now, in Michigan, you could do the same thing. I'm from Michigan originally, and I can tell you the level of politics there, the politics there are the culture is different. They have got a lot of work to do to cooperate with each other. We think that there's a big schism between the Twin Cities and greater Minnesota. It's 3 times worse in Michigan. Western Michigan, they would secede if they could. I mean, and I'm telling you that they've got to do a lot more cooperation. Now, they're trying. I could tell you, I've talked to them. They recognize the importance of building greater statewide cohesion in places like Michigan and Wisconsin. But we've got that legacy because of people who came before us helped us do it. They've got to do it in this generation. We should be there to help.
Congressman Ellison, I've got, well,
I'll try to be quicker in my answers,
yeah,
Larry.
I've got a group of questions here that are challenging, and I'm just going to roll through
Sure.
2 or 3 of them. One question I think appreciates the leadership role you've taken in the DNC and your efforts around the country for Democrats, but asks, how do you explain your congressional voting absences?
Yeah, good question. Well, let me just tell you this. I appreciate the question. One time I tore my patellar tendon, and I had to be in the hospital for that, and that took quite a while. Another time I had a child graduate. But, I mean, I'm very proud of my voting record. I mean, I'm there for my constituents, and I have had some medical and some other issues, but the truth is that, you know, when I mean, I'm there, I show up, and I have an excellent voting record.
John Lewis declared that Donald Trump is not my president. Is this what we want to be encouraging in Washington, and where you've got members of the opposite party kind of rejecting presidents? There's certainly Republicans who, you know, had real questions about Barack Obama. And is this the road we want to be heading down?
Well, look, if anybody in this country has earned the right to question the legitimacy of Donald Trump, it's John Lewis. I mean, this man paid for that right in blood. I mean, they smashed his head in and tried to burn a bus up that he was in, all for him standing up for the idea of liberty and justice for all. And, you know, when Donald Trump stands diametrically opposed to everything John Lewis stands for. I mean, John Lewis stands for the idea that all people should be treated equally. Donald Trump says we want to ban people based on their religion from coming into the country. John Lewis says that every child should have quality education. Donald Trump stands for Trump University, which paid out a settlement because it scammed people. And then he appointed Betsy DeVos, who's hostile to public education. I'm sorry, but I mean, you know, I know the politically correct thing for me to do is to say, oh, no, John should be sweet and nice to Donald Trump. No. But I'm not going to, because I don't believe it.
But I don't think the question is sweet or nice.
Okay.
I think the question is simply one of acknowledgement of our system of government. This was an individual who won the majority of electoral college votes.
Look, I am quite certain.
What's the issue in just recognizing Donald Trump, he's president?
I am quite certain that John Lewis knows that Donald Trump is the president. As a matter of fact, I'm sure he is well aware. But look, I mean, look, a better question is, do I acknowledge Donald Trump as the president? Of course I do. I mean, obviously he is, you know. But I think that he is perhaps the worst president ever. And I think that, and I'm sorry, there is a consensus among conservative and liberal people that it is okay to practice your religion as God has inspired you to do so. He rejects that. There is a basic consensus that the press is an important American institution. He rejects that. There's a basic consensus that we need to have an independent judiciary. He called a sitting judge unfit to rule on his case because he was a Mexican. I'm telling you, we're not in the normal area now. We're not in normal times. We're dealing with somebody who is openly hostile to core American values. And look, the real surprise is that he was able to get millions of people to vote for him. And I know that a lot of people have said, well, it's because of economic stagnation in some parts of our country. And others have said he's played on racial resentment. Maybe all that's true. But at the end of the day, I think that Donald Trump is a sign that as Americans, we got a lot of healing to do amongst each other. And I will say this, this is the best I can do for you. I don't think that it's a good idea, that the best way to win people over is to tell them they were suckers and had been had. They tend not to agree with that even if it's true. And so I think that I'm not going to be the one to tell Trump voters that, but I will try to tell them that what he promised you, he's not delivering. And maybe that will change the next election outcome.
So related to that, there are some questions. Have Democrats delivered for those Trump voters, for the rural whites, for the non-elites, for the people outside of metro areas? Did Democrats do enough to say, yes, we did, rather than just, yes, we can, and promising change once again?
Well, let me tell you this. There are some key things that I think we need to definitely improve on. But I would also say that presidents since, I think even Theodore Roosevelt talked about national health insurance of some kind. Franklin Roosevelt certainly did. Truman did. We all know Clinton tried. And Obama delivered on that. Now, was it what we had hoped? Yes, to a substantial degree. Perfectly? No. I personally believe in Medicare for all. That's a better program, in my opinion. And so, but look, on the road, if you start with the assumption we're going to have to keep the employer-based health care system, I think that the Affordable Care Act, it was a dramatic step forward. We certainly need to do some improving. A lot of people thought Dodd-Frank could have been much more aggressive. But look, the Consumer Financial Products Bureau has returned $11 billion to consumers. I mean, but here's the thing about either president. For the last 40 years, we have seen wages stagnate no matter who the president is, right? Now, poverty went down a little under Clinton, and you saw some wage increases during Obama. But the overall trend has been stagnation for working people. College debt has dramatically increased over all the presidents, Democrat or Republican. Communities of color own fewer homes than they used to before 2008, and people have very low savings. In 2007, we literally had negative saving rates in this country, meaning people were consuming on debt. And now it's positive, but not that much. And most people are living paycheck to paycheck, meaning that if you don't get your next period's paycheck, you are going to be in financial ruin. That's most people, a numerical majority. So your question is good. Has either party really addressed the economic challenges that huge numbers of Americans are facing? And I have to say to you, not really. And that's why I did support Bernie Sanders in the primary. It wasn't because I don't truly admire Hillary Clinton, I do. But I think that we need some really strong medicine to deal with the real, with the economic situation that most Americans are in. We need some really strong medicine. We need a new trade policy. We've got to have literally trillions of dollars invested in infrastructure, and we've got to dramatically decrease the cost of education, and we've got to increase wages, and we've got to come to a new consensus that dramatically high profit margins, are not nearly as important as increases in livable wages for working Americans. And, we live in an age now where, it's like, there is no basic sense that the average working person should be able to be prosperous. And, we just don't believe that. I mean, as a society, we don't. And I think that that has hurt both parties.
So, Representative, as a quick follow-up, how do you say to those rural voters who already think the government is too big that the solution is to spend trillions of dollars on investment, spend more money on education, spend more money on health care, when their base belief is the government is already too big and you're talking about making it bigger?
You know what, I guess it's just a matter of belief. When rural people or any people say the government's too big, I think what they mean is, should the government be able to tell me I can't plant my whole field and have to create a buffer and then not compensate me I think they think that might be too, somebody might say it's too big then.
So Governor Dayton's buffer program,
No,
not
I'm not
really?
getting that. I'm just using an example. I'm not talking about a specific program. What I mean is they might feel that that's government in my business. But I don't think people think government is too big when their Social Security check arrives. I don't think people think government's too big when their Medicaid is and their Medicare are helping them be in a nursing home or their parents. I don't think that they think the government's too big when the road, you can drive over it without you breaking the axle on your truck. I think it's like, what do you mean by government too big? Which aspect of too big are you referring to? Because I think a lot of people think government should be bigger than it is.
So picking up on this theme of where government should be bigger or not.
Yeah.
There's a series of questions here around rights of LGBT communities.
Sure.
And one set of questions wants to know what you will do to expand the guarantees and secure those rights. The other set of questions asks, do you think Democrats have overreached? And this is one of the reasons that older, whiter, more swing voters have migrated away from the Democratic Party.
Well, let me just say this regarding, the folks who might think that Democratic embrace of equality for LGBT community members is a problem. Look, in 2012, some folks tried to say that you had to be married to somebody who was the opposite sex of you, and that they wanted to put it in the Constitution. It failed. It failed in the 3rd Congressional District. It failed in the 2nd Congressional District. Failed in the 8th Congressional District. Certainly failed in the 5th and the 4th, and didn't do that great in the 7th. And I think we were competitive in the 6th. My experience is that if you talk to people, you relate to them, and you listen to them, they understand that everybody should have some rights. Now, not everybody buys that, but most Americans do, particularly if you have the patience to discuss it. Now, when it comes to how do we extend more rights for LGBT community members, I think that there shouldn't be anywhere in this country then somebody can say, you are gay, therefore you cannot rent this apartment. You are gay, therefore you cannot work in this job. I don't even think most Republicans believe that's true. I think that it is something that, the forces of inclusion have won that argument, and I think that's the direction the country needs to go in.
So there was a well-known book back 4 or 5 years ago called What's Wrong with Kansas? Mm-hmm. And the argument of that book was that Democrats could connect with swing voters with an economic message. The problem for Democrats in states that are potentially up for grabs is that their social message on issues like same-sex marriage and abortion was driving away these voters who would otherwise be supportive of the Democrats on economic issues of the very sort that you're talking about. Do you just not accept that?
I think it's where do you start? Like if somebody's biggest concern is that the plant is closing, even the gay people are worried about that. That's a fact. And so if I am a heterosexual white Christian couple living in, a rural part of the country, and you come to me talking about, LGBT issues when I'm worried about the plant closing or the mine shutting down, I'm going to think you don't get me. And if I were gay, I might still think you don't get me if you're not talking about how you're going to make sure that I can have a middle-class lifestyle. So I will say that I think you can talk about just about everything to everybody. It's a matter of the order in which you talk to them about these things. Like on guns, you've got a real problem because like in the urban areas, we face mass shootings. It's horrible, and we feel it's key to do something about that issue. Yet in rural areas, maybe somebody might not feel the way we do about it, but I think it's really more a question of how to discuss the thing. Because if you talk to the most NRA members, and they'll tell you that, there should be background checks, right? And so, we have a gatekeeper problem on some of these issues, which is that some elites don't want, speak for vast numbers of people who they don't actually speak for. But I don't think the problem is that rural whites are not, fair-minded people. I think it's a matter of priority. Because, look, I've talked about LGBT issues in rural Minnesota and rural Kentucky and rural West Virginia, and I don't get people closing the door and walking away. I mean, I've been in a VFW hall in rural West Virginia talking about LGBT stuff, and people kind of got it, But what I didn't do is call them prejudice and call them names. I just said, look, and I know you got relatives who are gay. Yeah, I do. Do you hate them? No. So I mean, that's how people are. So I mean, am I right about this? I mean, I think so. Yeah. But it's a matter of how. But then they'll say, well, I was raised this way, and and I saw some people on the Pride Parade, and they really look weird, and I'm not for that. You know what I mean? But in terms of just dealing with folks, I mean, people tend to accept
Rachel
each other.
Stassen-Berger is another question.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So Representative, you talked about the order in which you talk about these things.
Yeah,
You are often known as the Muslim congressman.
yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, once or twice.
Yeah.
Is that uncomfortable for you? How would you like to be referred to? How does your religion impact what you do and your identity on the national stage?
Well, I tell you, I was a Minnesota state legislator for 2 terms. You covered me.
I did.
And the issue.
Quite well.
Yeah, you were awesome. You were awesome. And yet I had my imam do a prayer before the opening of the session a few times, and not all the time, but like maybe twice. Nobody really cared. It really was not a big deal. I mean, I see Phyllis Khan here. Phyllis, did anybody ever make a deal out of me being Muslim when we were in the state legislature? No. And people who cared to know knew. During Ramadan, I was like, hey, what are you eating? No, I'm Ramadan. Oh, can I have your fish? Okay. So the thing is, it really was not that big of a deal. But I think in the national scene, it is a big deal because I think at home, I'm not really the Muslim congressman. I'm just sort of like Keith, and I think so. But nationally, when people don't know you, then you're not a person. You represent a group. You're a black. You're a Muslim. You're a woman. Barney Frank was the gay guy. And so that's sort of the problem. I think as time goes by and I just do what I do, it's become less of an issue. And I'll tell you this. When people ask me about Muslim-related things, I don't shy away from the conversation because I do think that I am in a position to help try to shed light, right? So even though that would not be my preferred thing to talk about, I'd rather talk about increasing the minimum wage. I'd rather talk about better trade policy. If the issue of, a Muslim ban comes up, I'm not going to decline that interview because I'm trying to help people, understand that, people are really just people, whether they pray on a Friday or on a Friday night or Saturday or Sunday. It's just fine.
So quick follow-up on that. You don't decline those interviews. In fact, in 2008, you gave an interview to the New York Times where you were critical of then candidate Obama for frustrating and not embracing the Muslim community as much. Do you think that changed? Do you think he got over that, or were you being overly critical?
He did. He went to a Baltimore mosque and gave a tremendous speech, and I was honored to be there, and I think he's done a good job with that. I will say that I think that when people were accusing him of being Muslim, people in his political camp felt like, well, we need to avoid that issue. We got enough problems, being the first black president and all that. But my argument to them was the people who accuse you of being Muslim, they're not going to suddenly, like you if you deny being Muslim, right? They're not. There's nothing you can do with these people. They don't even care if you're Muslim. They're trying to beat you, and they're throwing anything that they think is going to bring your numbers down. So stop worrying about them. And, I think that I don't know. I mean, I think the president gave a great speech in that Baltimore mosque. And, by the way, George Bush has been to mosques. Other presidents have done it. I think Thomas Jefferson was the first one to hold a White House iftar dinner, which is a breaking fast meal during the month of Ramadan. And so it's not like it wouldn't have been completely unusual for him to just do what George Bush did. But I think that politically they felt that it would be damaging, so they made the decisions they made. But he came around, and I'm proud of the work that he did.
We have another question from the audience that says, Democrats like to talk about pay your fair share of taxes, but only 50% of Americans pay taxes, with the other half not paying federal taxes.
If they got paid more, they'd pay more taxes. If people's pay went up, they'd pay more taxes. And by the way, 50% of, it's not true that 50% of people don't pay taxes.
Federal taxes.
Federal taxes. Well, that's not even true either, because if you have a job, you pay FICA, that's a tax. And so that's not really right. I mean, when people say that statistic, what they really mean is they make contributions and other people don't. And my point is everybody makes contributions.
Another question. Democratic Party, of course, had its emails hacked by Russians during the recent election.
Yep.
Now that you're in the DNC, is this going to happen again?
Absolutely not. I don't know. I hope not. Look, for all I know, they're hacking us now. I mean, let me tell you, we have put a lot of time, energy, resources, and investment into cybersecurity. It's a top priority, and we really got to make sure that we do something about it. I don't think it's a democratic. I don't think it's a democratic issue. I think it is a fundamental democracy issue, because if the Russians will hack the Democrats, they will hack the Republicans, and we cannot have, a hostile foreign power interfering and manipulating our elections. And I don't think if you're a Republican, you should take any comfort in the fact, it was the Democrats. No, this is all of our problem. And so I think it's a serious issue.
And there are, of course, investigations being done by the FBI. The House has a committee that's supposed to be working on it. You've got the Senate Intelligence Committee. What level of confidence do you have that there's going to be an investigation of one of these three that gets to the bottom of what happened and whether there was collaboration with the Trump administration that will be trusted widely, not just among Democrats who are ready to string someone up, but trusted widely among Republicans, among folks in the media who are going to be taking a pretty stringent look at what the evidence is?
Well, honestly, I think the media has a historically important role to play here. And I think that if the real answers ever come, it'll probably be because some intrepid reporter just wouldn't take no for an answer and kept digging. So I'm hoping. I got a lot of faith in the press on this regard. And in terms of the House committees, I think I believe Trump will reach a point where Republicans are going to turn on him, and at that time you're going to see an investigation. But not before, right?
What's that point?
I don't know. I mean, I think that here's the thing. There's already a number of things that Trump stands for that the House Republicans don't stand for, and they're on a collision course. I mean, Trump said jobs, infrastructure, fair trade. Paul Ryan's not for fair trade. He's for free trade. Infrastructure, we'll see. Tax relief. I don't think that Republicans who voted for Trump voted for him so that the top 1% could get even more tax breaks. And by the way, in his budget, he proposes cutting the Appalachia Regional Commission. I don't think that's going to be popular in Appalachia. So the thing is that I think that that we will reach a point where the Republicans are going to see it as to their advantage to have a real investigation.
So as the professor was asking his question, you made a face that made the audience laugh about the House investigation. Do you think that the House investigation is not worth the press releases it's written on?
Right now, I do not have any confidence in the House investigations right now. And the reason is, on the Benghazi investigation, I mean, they just went all in. They spent like $6 million. And they all eventually had to admit that Hillary Clinton didn't do anything wrong, with that. And so, but now they don't want to spend not much of anything And so it makes us cynical when we see them go after her. And then when McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy is asked, well, what good did the Benghazi investigation do? He got up there. He didn't say we found these answers, we found those answers, we gave truth to these family survivors. No, he said we brought Hillary Clinton's numbers down. That was his answer. And so, yeah, now we would think that they would put at least half of the vigor into trying to figure out what happened to our democracy that they put into trying to pull Hillary Clinton's numbers down. Add on to that the investigation on Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood, there was this whole thing about, they're selling baby parts. Well, the truth is they never were selling baby parts. This was always a doctored video. It was always deceptive. It was never fair and right. And yet they put a lot of time, energy, and resources into it. And yet we don't see anything similar on this side where there is a real legitimate problem. So that is why I made a face, and that might be why people laughed.
So to say a little about something you have in common with President Trump. You're both quite active on Twitter.
Right.
What do you get out of Twitter? Why were you an early adopter? And why do you block people on Twitter?
Well, the reason I use Twitter is because it's a way to get a 140-character message to as many people as you can get to follow you on Twitter. It's good information. A lot of times what I do is just share articles that I think are important to know about and put out perspective. We can demonstrate condolences when tragic things happen. We can honor people's holidays, all on Twitter, and the message gets across. Why do I block people? I really only block people if they're being abusive and profane. There were a few times when I blocked people who weren't in that category, but it was because I just didn't know how to use Twitter very well yet. But so I tried to unblock them, but sometimes that doesn't work.
So should they send you an email saying, can you unblock me now? I'm not nasty?
Yeah, we'll give people another shot if they're nice again. But I don't mind people disagreeing with me. But but if somebody just wants to hurl invective and say nasty stuff, why? It's a waste of their time and mine. So I block them.
There are a bunch of topics here. Maybe we could roll through a few of these. President Obama, of course, deported more undocumented folks who were living here than any previous president.
Right.
Now Donald Trump is moving back to extend that record. How do you differentiate between the two? It looks, I think there's some people, including some folks here, who say, isn't this an area where actually Donald Trump is building on a policy that President Obama had established?
I think it looks that way on the surface just because of the numbers. But I think it's important to understand the motivation was very different, right? So Obama said to Republicans, I want to do a bill on comprehensive immigration reform. I believe in a bill. I think we need to make some dramatic changes so we can give people a path towards citizenship, so we can make sure that we meet the needs of business, so that we can make sure that we unite families. And here's the bill. And actually, it got through the Senate. The Republicans collectively said, we will do a bill with you. They did. They said, we'll work with you. But you got to close the border. So Obama then goes to try to close the border and does all these things that you just referred to in terms of dramatically increasing deportations. So his goal was to try to meet the demands of a bargaining partner in order to get a bill. Trump just wants to throw people out of the country and is operating on some nativist thing that some people don't belong here. And that's the difference, in my opinion.
Another question, foreign aid is one of those topics that seems to be hammered by both parties. And of course, it's a pretty small part of the budget.
Very small.
1 to 2%, but it gets a lot of...
Smaller than that.
Less than 1%.
Yep.
And it gets a disproportionate amount of political attention and the campaign rhetoric and so forth. You took a trip to Africa with Congressman Emmer.
Yes, I did.
And he was someone who had ran expressing some reservations about foreign aid. And when Congressman Emmer came back, he said some things where he said, I learned some stuff, and I now see a role for foreign aid. Do you see much hope that there would be that kind of coming together of Democrats and Republicans, or is that just a kind of isolated instance?
Well, let me say, I think Tom Emmer is a fine person. I count him as a friend, and I like him. He and I disagree on a lot of things, but we don't disagree on everything. And so I don't see there, I think if there's somebody who I probably can find some common ground on privacy issues, maybe Tom would be that person. We disagree on taxes. We disagree on a lot of stuff. I agree with Tom on Cuba. Tom believes that we should not have this embargo going with Cuba. I think he's absolutely right. And he went there. I didn't go on that trip, but yeah, I think there's room for common ground, but it has to be with integrity. We don't just make deals to make deals. We make deals because we happen to agree, and we can both meet our goals with a little bit of compromise on certain aspects of a deal. But I'm not going to ask him to surrender a core belief. He's not going to ask me to surrender mine. And so that's how you arrive at a bipartisan consensus on something. There are other, me and Eric Paulson have agreement on trying to move forward on Liberian TPS issues, temporary protective status. And so there's, it's not as bleak as one might think. There are things that we agree on. We actually talk all the time, and we spend a lot of time together. There's not personal animus. That's something that people are sometimes surprised to learn. They think we actually don't like each other. That's actually not true. We just disagree because our constituents, we tell our constituents, I believe in this, I'm gonna fight for this. They vote for us, we go there, and most of us try to honor that. And that brings us into disagreement with some people.
So you might.
Representative, we've already talked a little about your soothsayer abilities, so let's do a speed round of predictions.
Here we go.
Who's going to be governor of Minnesota after the next election?
Well, I want to be clear. If I answer this question, I am not advocating. I'm simply predicting.
Do we agree? Okay.
So let me just ask everybody, am I advocating right now? No. Am I predicting? Yes. Tim Walz. I'm not advocating.
Who will control the U.S. House after the next election?
I believe we are going to win. We're going to control the U.S. House.
And are you going to run again?
Yes.
Who will control the U.S. Senate?
Senate, the Democrats.
Wait.
And
Let's just slow down there a second. Really? Because
we are. I'm telling you, we're going to do it.
The other two predictions, we could go back and forth, but this situation where Republicans have a 2-seat majority, and there are 10 Democrats running in states that Donald Trump won.
I'm telling you, we're going to have a reverse Trump effect in 2018. It's going to be good. And we just need people to be involved, need to be engaged, and knock a door and call a swing district.
Okay, now look into your crystal ball for the last question. 3 names of 3 Democrats who will run in 2020 for president and will do well.
Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Cory Booker of New Jersey. And I'm just saying who's going to run, huh?
Yeah.
And Martin O'Malley's going to run.
And so Keith Ellison 2020, we shouldn't start that rumor right now?
No.
Should we
don't
wait
start-
to start that rumor? Or are you
No.
denying it?
You can pretty safely, bet I will not be running for president in
So
2020.
let's extend this crystal ball gazing. We're sitting here in Minneapolis. There's a pretty heated mayoral race. What's your prediction about who will be the mayor elected in November?
Look, as the deputy chair of the DNC, I am not in a position
Prediction.
to make any sort of advocacy statements. I guess that the mayor's gonna win a re-election. That's my guess. I'm just guessing. I'm not saying what should or shouldn't happen.
Congressman Ellison, both Rachel Stassen-Berger and I appreciate your willingness to gaze into the crystal ball
All right,
with us.
well,
And-
I'm
and
out
also-
there, I'm on record now.
And also for your generosity of sitting here with us and the candor that you expressed and your good spirits. Please give a warm thanks to Congressman Keith Ellison.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.